I bet most of you at some point have read an essay by Linda Nochlin that asks, why weren't there more women artists? And it's a good question, but I would actually say the answer might be, it's amazing there were any women artists. Given the hoops they had to jump through, they were denied access to training, couldn't buy their own materials, couldn't even carry money, couldn't own money. They had to go to their husbands to buy canvas and paint. I like this saying that it's an ancient Greek saying that says necessity is the mother of invention. And I think mother is an operative word there because women have often known that it was necessity that often changed things for women. So I have just a few really quick examples to share with you, and then hopefully we'll bring it up to the 21st century and these remarkable women who are displayed here tonight. Have you heard of a woman named Partia Nelli? She took her orders to be a nun and quickly rose through the ranks. This would have been about 1560 in Florence, and her name we know as Sister Nelli. A lot of nuns had no resources from the church, and I've often heard that all of the visionary nuns may have actually been suffering from starvation. And so for the women to have artwork in their convents or to support themselves, they had to bring in their own food. Sister Nelli had an interesting idea. She wanted to learn how to paint, so she got Fra Bartolomeo to teach her, and not only was she painting paintings for her own convent, but she was selling them, and it was necessity. She was raising money so that the sisters in her convent in Florence could eat. Now let's go forward just about 20 years. One of my favorite artists, Sofonisba Anguissola. This is like a Pride and Prejudice story. Her father had 6 daughters before he finally had the much anticipated son. What are you going to do with 6 daughters? How is he going to marry them all off? So he had a very clever idea. I'm going to give them art lessons. And 3 of them actually caught on, one of them quite well, and that was Sofonisba. There are more self-portraits by Sofonisba than Rembrandt in the world, and the reason for that is that in Florence, in fact all over Italy, all over Europe, people were so amazed that there was a woman artist that they wanted her portrait to put into their Wunderkammers or their curiosity room so they could see what does a woman artist look like. And of course a lot of the men were jealous of that. Necessity, Lavinia Fontana, a generation later. She lives in Bologna. Women always do better when they're in a city that has a university, and of course Bologna had a great university going back to medieval times. Lavinia had 11 children and needed to support them. So if any of you women are going to complain that you're too busy to be an artist, just think of Lavinia Fontana painting her paintings and feeding 11 children. And I think we all know Artemisia Gentileschi. Her father, Orozco, is the one who for many, many years was the famous one. And Artemisia, the famous movie where she was raped by her teacher and had to go to court, and that sort of took her out of any kind of expectations within polite society. And today she is sort of the toast of all women artists from the Renaissance. So many of the women here today are such important artists. I look at Helen Frankenthaler, who actually is among the top 4 women who has sort of broken that $1 million price range at the high end. Of the 100 artists who have achieved top financial status for their artwork, there's not one woman. So I think Louise Bourgeois, Helen Frankenthaler. I think of Beverly Pepper, who is the first person to do Corten steel. It's like such a masculine material for her to work in, and I don't know that a lot of people know that. Pat Steir, who's back here against the wall, she had her own show at the Corcoran in 1973 when the National Gallery hadn't shown any women at all. Oh, and Nancy Graves had her first solo exhibition at the Whitney. And so there are some firsts in this show. I think about, if you've ever heard the quote from Hans Hofmann, who was teacher to a lot of the abstract expressionists, in seeing one of Lee Krasner's works, he said, "This is so good, you would not believe it was done by a woman." But so often women are written out of history. Do you know that in 1986, and this is the year after the Women's Museum is founded, there was not one woman artist in Jansen's History of Art? And you think about it, and when Jansen was asked, he said, "Is that right? Well, I really can't think of a woman who belongs there." That was one of the reasons that the Women's Museum was founded. It wasn't to segregate women. I don't think women, even if you'll remember in 1893, Chicago had a huge World's Fair. It had the first women's building. And there were a lot of women in 1893 that didn't want to be segregated. They wanted to be in the art building, not the women's building. And we used to hear a lot of that at the Women's Museum. But the fact of the matter is, when the Women's Museum was open, neither the National Gallery nor the Metropolitan Museum of Art had ever done one exhibition of a solo show for a woman. And so we really thought that it was the necessity of needing a place for women. I could go on and on. I think of Bert Morisot, one of my favorite artists. She, of course, dies in her 40s, dies young. So she never actually goes beyond Impressionism. And historians who wrote about her talked about her little teeny tiny bird-like voice. And if you know Bert Morisot's Impressionist paintings, they were anything but bird-like. She was the one who was the most bravura brushstroke of all of them, and she really believed in Impressionism and practiced it her entire career. So sometimes I think historians will write things that women become, it just becomes attached to a woman. Let me end on this idea, and it actually comes from the Women's Museum. Wilhelmina Cole Holliday and her husband Wally went into a gallery, they looked at a painting and said, "Why is this one half the price of that one?" And the dealer said, "Oh, because it's by a woman. You really don't want that one." Well, Wally was like an investment banker, and he said, "I think that the woman's painting is the bargain." And I think it is true today that women are still such a bargain. If I were to advise someone to collect something, it would be like find a woman artist and support her.
The mission of our organization is to promote the free expression of all women in Muslim-majority societies, thereby giving voice to their struggle for civil, economic, and political rights. Since its inception in 2010, WVN boasts a number of outstanding achievements. We had a film festival in 2011 where there were 98 films from over 40 countries. There was a global tour in the Middle East, a university tour across the United States, and through our interactive website, where all of our films are still viewable and available for commentary by the audience, whoever views them, WVN has had and continues to have an immeasurable impact on the discourse of women's rights in Muslim-majority societies. In the few months that I've been part of the organization, I've also learned that WVN has been ahead of its time, and that's entirely due to Leslie Sachs and his understanding of how to effect truly meaningful change. WVN, from its inception, recognized that the immutable, inalienable human rights of women must come before all else, the most important of which is free expression. Without free expression, there's only stagnation, repression, totalitarianism, manipulation, and subjugation. WVN, therefore, provides a platform for struggles that are ongoing, the right to marry whomever one wants, to live free from fear of abuse at the hands of husbands and fathers, to choose a husband, to choose a profession, an academic path, a way of dressing, of practicing religion or ethnicity, an end to trafficking, to child brides, to forced prostitution, and to genital mutilation. Addressing all of these complex issues always begins with some form of expression. WVN encourages the use of film, visual arts, writing, and advocacy to support, spark, and promote the women and men who are asking their communities and the world to get to work on these daunting challenges. In our interconnected world, what happens to women across the globe affects us, whether emotionally or tangibly, and WVN seeks to forge a support network for these women and to let them know we are listening and that we want to help. We will continue to do this through our upcoming global tour when we hope to visit Morocco, Turkey, Jordan, Israel, and the West Bank this summer, and our 2014 film festival that we will broach the topic of women bought and sold, which will deal with trafficking, sex slavery, servitude, and child brides in Muslim-majority societies, and also our new publication, The W Voice, which will see its first issue come to light later this month, and numerous other projects that are in the making. WVN's work is not possible without the generosity and optimism of people like Leslie Sachs, who's our founder of the organization and its most magnanimous supporter, the members of the board and advisory board, the many volunteers and interns who give generously of their skills, talents, and time, and individuals who put what they have to use for the realization of the organization's mission. The famous saying of Margaret Mead, American cultural anthropologist and advocate for progressive social change, that we should never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Rings true for women's voices now. In that spirit, thank you for being here at the opening of Women's Art Now, learning about these amazing artists and their work, and the work of Women's Voices Now.